I'm Katie Keith, founder and CEO at Barn2.
And I'm James Kemp, core product manager at WooCommerce. And as you can see, we were going to do a fancy reveal, but Matt is in the room already. So our special guest today is Matt Mullenweg, and we're going to be talking to him about his vision for the future of WooCommerce.
Yeah, so thank you, Matt, so much for coming on. I'm sure that everybody watching already knows who you are. So could you introduce yourself in the context of your work with WooCommerce? Because people know you're the CEO of the company that WooCommerce is now part of, but they don't necessarily know the details of your involvement and the history of it.
Sure. So, yes, as you said, I'm the CEO of Automattic, and WooCommerce is one of the products of Automattic. So I work really closely with Bo Labens, who leads Woo. He's the artistic director of the WooCommerce Maison. We have some funny titles inside of Automattic. How it started was, I always have thought about WordPress as an operating system. And so I want to study like previously successful operating systems. And so I read a lot of computer history books and of course study the history of Microsoft. And I felt like WordPress was our Windows. We had the platform, but we hadn't yet found the killer app on top of it. The thing that both, there's a ton of demand for and also elevates the platform itself. So, so that was Microsoft Office for Windows, right? Like when Office came along, that sort of like blew up Windows. And so I just started like really digging into the tens of thousands of plugins and themes that were out there and looking for trends and seeing what people were using and like listening to the community at WordCamps and things like that. And commerce as a category started to stand out. And within that category, because there were a number of commerce solutions, WooCommerce really started to be like something I'd known about and Automattic I actually looked at before, but started to take pretty seriously. And I believe 2015, we reached an agreement with the Woo founders to have them, acquire them and have their team join. I think there were 43 people at the time. The team was only a few developers, though. It was only like 3 developers. Honestly, that some of the code wasn't as like performant or scalable or other things. But I was like, okay, well, Automattic has like some of the best, engineers in the world. So we can definitely fix all the engineering stuff. Woo has nailed like the community and the branding and the user experience and all this other stuff, which is actually kind of harder. And so let's bring the best of what we've learned from building like WordPress, WordPress.com, everything we've done at Automattic, and start to apply that playbook to Woo. And that was 2015, so about a little over 10 years ago. And it's been an exciting ride. I think, we don't talk about the Woo stat as much, but I think it's something like 8% of all websites in the world now run WooCommerce.
Wow.
Which is huge, yeah. I remember the 10-year anniversary. Sorry. I remember the 10-year anniversary. I guess it was last year now, in 2025. And a surprising number of the people who came over with that acquisition was still thriving and working on WooCommerce and in other areas of Automattic as well, which was nice to see.
Yeah, the team is hundreds of people now, obviously. And and the community has grown so much. It's been very, very exciting to be a part of. And also it was humbling, much in the same way I was humbled by Tumblr. In Woo, I was like, oh, we've been doing CMS for a while. How hard could commerce be? But commerce has like a multifactorial complexity, especially as you go international, with payments and shipping and inventory and returns. And like there's so much because it really bridges for some stores, the physical and the digital world.
Yeah, for sure. And there's so many different combinations of, apps and plugins and things that people are using, different hosting software that there's, I couldn't imagine how many different variations of WooCommerce exist in the world.
No two are alike.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks to everyone who has submitted questions beforehand on social media for Matt. We're going to walk through a lot of them and see what, Matt's vision for the future of WooCommerce is, and also feel free to ask any additional questions as we're talking that you would like us to put forward to Matt.
Yep. And before we get into the Q&A, Do the Woo is essentially a new podcast. It's part of the Open Channels Network, which is now much wider than just Woo. So that's why we've relaunched Do the Woo as a dedicated WooCommerce podcast within Open Channels. So that means it has all of its own channels like the YouTube and Apple and Spotify and all of that. So wherever you watch these things, please subscribe there, and wherever you're watching now as well.
Yeah, we received a ton of questions, which we're not going to be able to get to all of them today. But what we would like to do is put to Matt the most pressing questions that we felt, his vision and input would be great to hear. And then Katie and I, and potentially someone else from WooCommerce, will do a follow-up episode in a few weeks to try and answer the remaining questions.
Ooh.
Yeah, and we thought let's start with WooCommerce's competitive advantage and the wider landscape that it sits in, because a lot of people are talking about that and the big competitors that are in the e-commerce world, both within and outside of WordPress now. After that, we're going to talk about the user experience of WooCommerce, the community, its features and priorities, and finally, we're going to ask Matt about his long-term vision for it. So we're going to try and slot the live questions into that structure. So first of all, we've got a question from Robin Peterson from Foo Plugins, which is, what is WooCommerce's biggest existential threat, internal or external? And what are you doing about it right now?
This is a good question. So with a product like at the scale of WooCommerce, they're never actually killed by competitors. So I would say the biggest threat is internal. When products like that fail, it's always because of execution. People think it's competitors, but it's not. So I would say the biggest risk is our ability to execute against what we're hearing from the community and what we know that the software needs and the roadmap. Now the competitive landscape is interesting. Certainly it's, with a company like Shopify and a product like Shopify, forces us to really bring our best stuff. Because you know what? Shopify is really good. They're quite impressive. And they're, 6,000-7,000 people with a bajillion dollars. Now, some people might look at that and say, oh, wow, WooCommerce has no chance. But actually, this sort of David versus Goliath thing is exactly where WordPress was in 2008, 2009. If money was all you needed to create great software, right? We'd all be using Windows on our phone. But it really software built for love, not just money, and the community approach of something like WooCommerce can be very, very compelling. And then, of course, in 2026, the first question you have to ask yourself when you're choosing anything is, am I choosing software which increases my freedom or decreases my freedom? Which is fundamentally the question, am I choosing open source or not? So really, before you look at any features or anything else, I think you need to choose how you'd like your freedom scale to balance and what direction you want to go there. And open source, what differentiates WooCommerce from others in the market, other great e-commerce things out there, e-commerce features on Wix or Squarespace or Shopify or whatever there is it increases your freedom. And especially in an age of AI, I think feature differentiations are going to start to fade a little bit, right? So Shopify has a feature that WooCommerce doesn't have. Maybe before, you'd have to wait for the Woo team to build it or someone to make a plugin or something like that. But now obviously that cost is going down. If you're pretty good with Cloud Code, you could probably whip something up yourself. And by the way, there's thousands of other developers out there using it. So I think we're going to start to see sort of the feature differentiations between things start to fade a little bit. And so really what you're choosing is a community, a platform, and like I said, that freedom stance.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good answer. I think the AI angle is going to change a lot of things, and it's moving very quickly. And I think those changes are just going to keep compiling over the coming year. So that'll be cool to see. The next question we have is from Nick McLaughlin. Hopefully I said his surname right. He says, what are WooCommerce's competitive advantages and how do they set Woo up for success in the next 5 years? And I think this touches on what you were just saying about open source just then.
So I'm going to repeat it. Biggest competitive advantage is freedom. If you care about freedom, if you want more liberty, autonomy, if you want sovereign software, Woo is the best e-commerce platform in the world to provide that. And the second, I would say, is Woo's open and infinitely extensible nature. So we're in an interesting period right now where, because you can kind of one-shot generate software, you get kind of this, like, it's an incredible rush. Like if you've done this with AI and you tell it to make something, or even like on Telex, you tell it to make like a Doom blog or something. You're like, what just happened? I just created Doom from some words I typed in a box. And that is very, very exciting. However, I think, well, there'll be like applications of that. I do feel like where we'll see the plurality of usage and commerce and interaction is going to be with malleable software. And I apologize, this isn't a term I came up with. I saw some designers say it. I'm forgetting their name, but this idea of like malleable versus generated software. So where you take something that is already there, it's been built by humans and has the craft and security and all the things that come from the decades of investments, the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands maybe at this point of person hours that have been built into the engineering, the craft, the security, and the platform of Woo. And then you create malleable software on top of that. So you can customize it. This is, of course, what makes WordPress great and WooCommerce as well, is that with the hooks and filters and actions and everything, you can modify pretty much everything for better and worse. Of course, we know how this creates complexity and everything like that. But ultimately, I feel like that freedom, that creativity, which is enabled, just allows for faster evolution. If for Shopify to get better, Toby has to have a good idea. And I'm saying Toby as a stand-in for like everyone at Shopify, right? Like I can't ship a new feature to Shopify. They have a platform as well, but it's like more limited, right? Now for WooCommerce to get better, I could be the biggest idiot in the world. In fact, I am. So the beauty is that like, not just the WooCommerce developers, but everyone in the community can make it better, or just make it better for them. It doesn't even need to be better for everyone. And that sort of personalization, I think, is, again, the question was the advantages. So, again, there's reasons to rent an apartment versus own a house. Sometimes it's convenient and it's nice to use something kind of off the rack. And if you fit into it, more power to you. Actually, one of my great blessings in life is I am very much a men's medium. So like I can walk into a store and pick up a suit. I had to the other day because I was going to a funeral, so I didn't have a black suit. So I was able to go in and get something off the rack, and it fit quite well. I have other friends who have different proportions. If they don't get something tailored, it looks ridiculous on them. So if you can get the off the rack, that's pretty cool. And if you're happy with that, great. So off the rack software can be fun, but at the moment that you need any personalization or you want it to be more better fit to you and tailored, that's when I think open source really starts to shine, and a platform like WooCommerce gets there. Now, what do we need to get better at? And maybe this is an existential threat, is education. I think one of the biggest opportunities for WordPress and WooCommerce is education. And that's why I'm so excited about like the WordPress education credits program. What I'm calling 26 the year of the meetup. Actually, going to be doing a ton to enable meetups, to make meetups better, to get meetup organizers better, material and support and everything like that. And of course, meetups ladder into WordCamps, which, as we know, are part of the magic of the whole WordPress community. But really, what that fundamentally is like there's this I'm sorry, this is a long answer, but we're probably hitting a few other questions as well that I read. When you think about it fundamentally, spreads, it's usually like a see, do, teach, right? That's kind of the three things that are exciting. You see something that's exciting to you. It's a store or someone making something or someone doing something. You're like, oh, I could do that. This is how I got started blogging, right? There are all these blogs out there. I was like, oh, this is just a normal dude like me. Like I could blog. I thought to have a website or to publish, you had to be like a journalist or like, have certifications or an editor. And it turns out, nope. I'm dating myself, but in like early 2000s, like this was an innovative idea that anyone could start a blog. And so having people see what they can do with WooCommerce is really, really important. That's why things like the showcase and demos are great. Then you do it yourself, right? That's the next level, which is very exciting. So you kind of learn from that, what you saw, and you do it yourself. And then the final, where you reach like ultimate status, is when you teach someone else to do it, right? When you pass it on. And when you think about it, like WordPress and WooCommerce even hasn't grown because like our competitors, we spent billions of dollars on marketing, It's grown because of that see, do, teach, which is also kind of like word of mouth, I'm sure many people listening here can imagine what their introduction to WordPress or WooCommerce was. And it might have been you just came across the website and figured it all out yourself. But for a lot of people, you probably had a friend or maybe an influencer online who said, hey, look at this, check this out. And that was your entree into the community.
Yeah, well, you've talked about the open source side of things. So that leads us into a question that somebody else had, which is about the relationship between like WooCommerce and people choosing other WordPress plugins that also are obviously open source. So Rodolfo from Business Bloomer and Checkout Summit, I don't know why I've written e-commerce there, says, what can we learn from SureCart, FluentCart, EDD, and the other e-commerce plugins, given, I suppose, that they equally have that freedom of open source?
Oh, well, the beauty of that is, what we can learn is they can also exchange code. They can use WooCommerce code, and WooCommerce could use their code. So I think that's, being able to be inspired and share and, between products is like part of what accelerates the cycle of innovation. So if there's something specific, I don't have anything specific to say about any of those particular products, except that I'm really glad they exist.
Yeah, every bloke. I wanted to touch on your point earlier about just the extensibility of WooCommerce, and that being one of the main reasons that people would want to choose it, is the kind of flexibility and the freedom you have to not only build on top of it but contribute code to it. That's something that we're really focusing on at WooCommerce, is making this the platform, the underlying code of WooCommerce to be very it should have all of the base features that you would expect, and work in a consistent way that you can extend on top of. So if someone chooses one person's bulk editor plugin, they could easily switch to another one, and it would work in a similar way, with the underlying logic being the same. So that kind of ability to pick and choose which extensions you use on top of WooCommerce is something that we want to make very reliable for the people installing WordPress and using WordPress and WooCommerce. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. But moving on to user experience, we have a question here from Ian, and I know he said online how to say his surname, and it's not how I would say it. I think
it's Meisner, not Misner, Meisner.
Ian Meisner from Kestrel WP. He has asked, if a mid-sized retailer, say doing around $5 million a year, lands on WooCommerce.com, what is the ideal path for them to get started, and what are the biggest obstacles?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I guess kind of the first fork in the road there would be, do it myself versus do it for me. So, hopefully at WooCommerce.com, they get excited about the possibilities of the platform and see examples of stores like them that are very successful or increase their business or increase their conversions by, utilizing some of the things on there. So either they go the direction of like going to one of the partner web hosts, which are not just Automattic ones, by the way, we point to others, and get signed up with, WooCommerce configured and everything like that. And they can start to go through the configuring WooCommerce process. I'll be the first to admit that that's a bit heavier than the WordPress process. And so someone will have to have some motivation. Now, I'll also say that AI is raising people's ability to make it through these things, right? Because they just put a ChatGPT window next to it and say, I'm stuck, what do I do? Or, gosh, even now we're having the browsers that have these AI agents built in, which I talked about at WordCamp US and State of the Word. And so like you can actually have the AI just kind of like watch it do stuff for you. You can say, build me this, and it'll start to like navigate WooCommerce and do it. And you can see it do it, which is also kind of like, again, making that do it yourself path way more accessible. So pre-AI, I would have said probably 95% of the time they go to a developer or consultants. And, we link to some great things there. We have agency partners. There's great platforms like Codable. And of course, the big ones like Upwork and everything. Like it's, one of the great things about the WordPress and WooCommerce community is there's like so many people who are fluent in it. And so you can really find someone who's a great match for you, whether that's in your language or in your country or whatever it is that's like important to you, or they have a portfolio that matches what you want to build. There's a great kind of ecosystem there, two-sided marketplace. So that would be one possible path. That percentage is probably going to come down in terms of total numbers, but I think the total demand for third-party developers is going to go up. Right, so maybe let's say AI makes it so only, let's just say half. So half of people can do it themselves versus hiring a developer. So you think, okay, if there were obviously a finite number of Woo stores being created, that would mean less work for third-party developers. But actually, what's going to happen is there'll be more demand for stores being created in general. And so, there might be some dips and valleys in there, but ultimately, like if I go out 10 years, there's going to be way more like Woo jobs than there are today.
Yeah, I totally agree that it's a big benefit of Woo how many people are fluent in it. For example, we use the easy digital downloads on the Barn 2 site, and it can be very difficult when we need to find an expert or hire somebody that's already experienced in that. With Woo, it's really, really easy. There are so many people that have all different skill levels, all different price ranges, so you can find an expert that easily. Which brings us on to the community section, where we have another question from Ian, who asks, what does healthy collaboration look like between the platform and the community?
I think it looks like what Woo has done for the past 10 years and before even the acquisition. I always say, I usually say this for WordPress, but I think it applies to Woo equally well. Its success has been predicated on how closely it has that collaboration with the community, what that looks like. And gosh, there's so many examples of things. Like I talk about WAPU. I would have never approved WAPU. And how amazing is like WAPU for the WordPress community? Like that is something that like comes up from the community. The cool thing about open source is that like, community happens whether you want it to or not. Right? Because people just publish plugins or fork the software, or whatever happened. Like, so you kind of get, one thing I love about open source is that it kind of forces you, if you're the steward of the software, it keeps you honest, because it's very natural market forces that, unless you're like the most stubborn person in the world or blind, you'll just like wake up one day and be like, okay, everyone's using this plugin. We should just build it into core, or whatever it is that's happening. Or every time I go to WordCamp, 10 people tell me this. So, those sorts of things. So what that looks like in the future is, if I had to say something I'd like to see more of this year in terms of collaboration, is I'd love to see more talks at WordCamps around WooCommerce. I'd love to see more either dedicated WooCommerce meetups, which, WooCommerce does have its own meetup.com thing, or like topics, like how do we, teach more broader WordPress developers, like how they can learn Woo and how that actually probably increases their economic value in the marketplace, right? One nice thing about working in the e-commerce world, like we said, there's a store that's making $5 million a year. Let's say they're making $5 million a year from their website. Like they're going to want, feel comfortable investing in that. So if you think of what their threshold is versus like, someone else building a website, a coffee shop, you're building a website for their coffee shop. They're making most of the money from people coming to the door. The website's nice to have, but of their revenue, how much will they spend? Let's call it 0.5%, 1% on the website. Or like an e-commerce store, both the revenue might be higher, but also like the percent they're willing to reinvest into their infrastructure and their website and development and customization and everything is probably much higher. Hosting, they'll want to pay for more performant hosting and invest in those things. So, we track 30-something billion of GMV happening through WooCommerce. And the actual number is higher than that because we're not able to track everything. So when you imagine like the economic opportunity for doing things in the WordPress ecosystem, it's pretty huge. I would say bigger than WordPress, actually.
Yeah, for sure. I think it touches on a point why I've always said, I started as a WooCommerce plugin developer. And I chose that route because the types of clients we were getting were the ones that had money to spend on this stuff because their store relied on, transactions going through it. And that's how I kind of fell into the e-commerce side of things. So it's definitely true that it's a profitable area of WordPress and of any like online business, I would say. I'll touch quickly on the healthy collaboration as well, because there's a couple of projects where we have collaborated last year. One being the accessibility project that we had for WooCommerce. We collaborated with Equalize Digital, and that was just a case of, myself and Amber getting in touch and talking about what that might look like, and that's came to fruition. WooCommerce is now fully accessible, which is awesome on the front end. Another example is we worked with Becca at Kestrel on scoping out what shipping fulfillments might look like in WooCommerce, and that is also a feature that Becca heavily helped to scope out what they've been hearing from customers and clients around what people want, and that work is now also in WooCommerce core behind a feature flag, but it's there to be used and tested. So I'd love to see more stuff like that, just more collaboration of what people are seeing in the ecosystem, and just putting that out there to someone like me or any other product person at WooCommerce so we can talk about it. GitHub is a great place to do that. The next question you actually touched on already was from Rodolfo, and he said, is there going to be any more WooCommerce, or is there going to be more WooCommerce coverage at flagship WordCamps? It sounds like you think there should be.
Oh, should is relative. So if people want it, there will be. So I'd say be the change you want to see in the world. If you want more WooCommerce at WordCamps, if you are listening to this podcast, you probably could be a speaker. So make the pitch. And if you're helping to organize a WordCamp, understand your audience. Obviously, look at who's coming, and I do think that with almost a quarter of all WordPress websites using WooCommerce, maybe something like a quarter of sessions at WordCamp should be about WooCommerce more broadly. Like you said, there's other solutions as well. I think that's great. As long as things are open source they're welcome at WordCamps.
Yeah, well, that's what I would have thought. But the last few flagship WordCamps that I've been to, I have submitted a talk about e-commerce or WooCommerce. I've tried both, and a talk about myself, like my story. And my story is always the one that's been accepted, like at WordCamp, I think Asia last year, but there's been 3 or 4. And nobody accepts my e-commerce talks, which I think are really interesting. So I'm a bit concerned about why that is, because all the data you said is totally correct about how many sites use WooCommerce and e-commerce generally. That's where the money is. And yet I am finding it really hard to spread the word about WooCommerce and e-commerce at WordCamps. And I don't know why that is.
Well, Katie, your story is really good. So...
But everyone's heard it. I think e-commerce is more interesting these days.
Okay, well then don't submit it. And just submit the e-commerce, or submit it and then do a little bait and switch. When it's like my story, actually turn it into an e-commerce talk.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. That's definitely needed. Whoever does the talks, there should be much more representation at WordCamps.
Well, and I'll keep that in mind. You know, the WordCamp I'm most active in choosing the content for is WordCamp US. So as that comes around and I look at things, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So the next group of questions are about the features and upcoming priorities of WooCommerce. So the first one there was from Ian again. WooCommerce has intentionally served merchants, product builders, and agencies. Are their goals and targets aligned to those segments, and how are they prioritized?
Merchants, product builders, and agencies. Yes, there are goals tied to each one of those. How are they prioritized? Off the dome, not certain right now. James might be able to answer this better, but those are, I would say, some of the big personas that as we build things in Woo, you try to, well, often sometimes when we build things, it addresses all of them, but as we make it more usable or something like that benefits everyone. But yeah, there's definitely been some, I would say, some more specific outreach around like growing the agency program or other things like that. I also saw feedback that there's WordCamps might not want pitches for a specific product. I think I agree, and I would say that once a product also becomes a platform itself, like WordPress, and if you go to the WordPress plugins directory, there's hundreds or thousands of WooCommerce plugins. It's okay, once it becomes not just about itself, but actually something that a lot of people can build on. That's okay for a WordCamp.
Interesting, yeah, that's a fair point. You don't want to promote a specific product, I guess, but yeah, I mean, WooCommerce is huge at this point, so it deserves to be talked about.
And people want solutions, so
yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. I've always found that on Reddit, actually, they block a lot of comments when you provide a solution to the question because it looks like promotion, but actually it solves the issue that they were having. But sidetrack.
Often a product does, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we've got a couple of follow-up comments of people watching live about the WordCamp discussion. So let's do that before we move on to more pre-submitted questions. So Dave has suggested next flagship, a separate room for e-commerce. I would love to see that. That would make a lot of sense, actually.
That would be cool to see.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll tease something as well, which is this could be an interesting year to have a dedicated Woo event again.
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of independent events popping up, which is interesting. So we've just had, well, it was kind of, I think, WordCamp affiliated e-commerce day for WordPress in Porto, which James and I both spoke at. And then we've got Checkout Summit in Sicily in April. So it's interesting to see that community interest is growing in the e-commerce side of things, and Checkout Summit is specifically WooCommerce rather than e-commerce as well. So I am liking that direction.
There hasn't been a WooConf in a few years, and I think this would be a cool year to see another one.
Yeah, and we got a comment from Brent.
This is what I addressed earlier. This is the one I was responding to.
Oh, okay.
If it's a platform and there's like hundreds of plugins in the directory on top of it, I think that sort of, it's a spectrum, but that's where it makes it a little bit more okay, I would say, to talk about, or a lot more okay to talk about a specific, plugin or solution or things.
Awesome. Was that all the questions that you had, Katie?
Yeah.
Cool. I think it's worth touching on the prioritization point, because I think I can speak to that a bit more. One of the focuses this year will be that every release should have something beneficial for each one of those target groups of people, and to more clearly, put that out there in writing, like this feature or this enhancement is specifically targeted at this group of people or group of users. So I think we'll definitely see a lot more of that this year, which will be great to see. We have a question from Ian.
Of course.
Our list of questions are all from Ian. If developer resources were not a constraint, what would you do? So what would unlock the biggest leap forward? So if you had unlimited developer resources, where would you put them?
That is a really good question. And Ian, I'll say that it's very prescient with this idea of intelligence being on tap with AI agents. We're seeing, if you're listening to this and you haven't been Claude Code pilled yet, take some time. Nothing else from this podcast. Take some time, go through some tutorials, install Claude Code. By the way, it's not just for code. You can use it in other files on your computer. You can use it with your notes. You can use it with so much. I saw some crazy stuff with it being hooked up to Playground and Beeper today. Like, you can do some really, really neat things. And that kind of is an unlimited developer resource in some ways that we haven't seen. And it is the 1.0 version. And the capabilities that are coming out this year as the new NVIDIA chips come online, all the new data centers you heard about get built, especially some of the Elon Musk stuff, which is moving very quickly, but also the investments from Google, Meta, everyone, like Anthropic. Like, we're going to see some, if you thought last year was exciting from an AI point of view, I think this will actually be the year that is a little more jaw-dropping. So January 14th, mark my words there.
To touch on the Claude Code, they just released in the Claude desktop app something called Claude Cowork, which is Claude Code under the hood. You set it up, you choose a folder to run it in, and it runs in exactly the same way as Claude Code, but it's a lot less technical. It's not a CLI based interface, which is very useful for non-code based work, where Claude Code seemingly excels, which I don't think was the expectation when they released it. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. But it is on
it's going to get
the
better.
Max plan.
So
yeah,
this also, back to the brilliance of Ian's question, is it's almost like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing. Like, the answer, when you can have any answer, like what you ask and what you build is really important. And so, I would pick, honestly, I would pick what WooCommerce's roadmap is, because that was kind of the, it's not that we have unlimited developer resources, but we do have, a pretty active process of the hundreds of people who work on WooCommerce, and the investments that are happening into the scalability, the sort of idea of the interface being more radically accessible, and kind of unifying some of the things that are right now like sort of some classical WordPress interfaces, but could be maybe reduce people's clicks, reduce kind of the friction they have when they're running the store day to day. Earlier, there was a mention of merchants. I would say very much the merchant experience is on my mind. And sort of like, if you're running a store every day, what do you do 10 times or 100 times? And how can we make that a little bit smoother? And again, every click you can remove, every sort of way you can sand the edges of that experience multiplies, right? Because people are doing it hundreds of times a day themselves, and of course, millions of times a day across the WooCommerce system. Checkout's already getting a lot better, but of course, anything in the checkout is a multiplier for our ecosystem. It's already there. There's probably some things in Stripe Link or Shop Checkout that we don't match yet, and for some stores or some geographies, and so that could be improved. For main ones like US stuff, I think it's pre-parity now in terms of conversions. Performance, you can always be faster. Always be faster. There's no one who says, I would love this website to load slower.
Yeah, well, that brings us quite nicely to the next question, which is, what are the top milestones WooCommerce will deliver in 2026, which is from Robin.
James, I feel like we should point to a WooCommerce blog post or something here. Like, is there like an official resource? I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, Bo actually published, I believe it was late last year, and I'm sure Brent in the comments will be able to drop a link in. But his vision for 2026 for WooCommerce, which is something that, you know, we're really sticking to. And I think one of the, so the quality is high on the list. Performance is high on the list. Builder experience is high on the list, as well as merchant experience, which is always high on the list. And also, I think, you know, evolving with the AI ecosystem as it moves, and just adapting to that, integrating things like the Stripe agentic commerce protocol and the new Google UCP protocol that they announced, and just really working and refining those experiences are always top of mind. Hopefully Brent can drop in a link to the relevant blog post from Bo. But yeah, that should be sufficient, I would have thought.
Yeah, you mentioned the builder experience. We've got a live comment from Jerry, who says, is there any roadmap for the block editor on the single product?
There has been a lot of, so I guess the block, there's two ways you could understand this question. One is kind of using the new interface, what we call data forms, as the interface for the product editor, which is one experience, and that replaces the whole experience of the product editor. And the other one is the block editor existing as a way to update the product description, which the way I read that question is more in line with that.
Yeah, I think so. Like creating multi-column layouts with blocks and things like that for the product page, instead of just the template-based layout we're used to.
Yeah, and I would say there's no official roadmap, but it's something that for me is high priority to dig into. Like that experience of using the editor to customize your product pages is just awesome. Like it's much more flexible and impressive than, you know, a standard text editor. Matt, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh, that sounds good. I apologize. I am not the biggest WooCommerce expert in the world, which is funny. Thank you for having me start your show. I think about it a lot more from the sort of like broader ecosystem and the strategy and the those sorts of things I can speak to probably a little more, or like the future of like development and computing and those sorts of things. But for a specific question like that, I think James is a much better person to answer, or Bo if he was here.
Yeah, agreed. There was quite a lot of questions that were really specific, that when we went through them, we thought, actually, we've got James, the core product manager, as a host. We don't need, whereas for this interview, we wanted to go high level and talk about the wider vision and the future, bigger picture stuff. So that's what we were expecting.
And sorry about that for the audience, but either James or like other guests, I think, could do some more of those like super deep dives. So think of this as like the appetizer for Do the Woo. Tune in
exactly
episodes to go much, much deeper.
Yeah, I think it's just really great to hear what you envision e-commerce or WooCommerce could be. So I think we've touched on that quite a lot, which is.
I did see a few questions coming about UCP, so I'll speak to that. And someone's like, "Why weren't you part of the announcement or whatever that is?"
Please
there we go.
Yeah. Any update on UCP, which just Google recently launched? How will WooCommerce move forwards with this?
So, I mean, without speaking specifically to UCP, I will say that it is funny, given how much bigger and more money they have, that Shopify is kind of scared of WooCommerce. So often they will negotiate to be sort of an exclusive day of launch announcement. And if you notice with like the Stripe stuff, I mean, we were there on day one, but it didn't get announced a few days later. Or if they just negotiated to like for us to find out about it when everyone else does, like, you know, it'll come really quickly. So don't worry about that. It'll all be supported. The second thing I'll say though is that, and there was an article in the information about this a few days ago, is that these things are not being used at all. It's very telling that almost a year after some of this stuff was first announced, there have been almost no one talking about how many transactions have gone through this. And it was like a headline feature, like the Stripe conference and the Shopify thing and all this sort of stuff. The CEOs are there and it's moving the stock prices. And like, so it's very interesting. This happens in software kind of frequently, is occasionally there's something that everyone's like, oh, that is the best idea ever in the world. And it gets a ton of hype and a ton of everything. And then once it kind of lands in the world, users are like, nope, doesn't fit, or there's something missing. Now, I'm not saying that agentic commerce 10 years from now won't be like a double-digit percentage of commerce or something. Like, you know, we'll probably figure this out, but it might also be, you know, the Google Glass or you know, one of these things that where you can put $1 bajillion into and it seems like the coolest idea, but like when it meets the reality of real world, there's something about it that just kind of like doesn't make it gel.
And yeah, I agree. There's some barriers that are going to put people off. Things like buying in AI. Well, how about buying multiple things in order to get free shipping? Just having one product recommended isn't that relevant. James and I discussed this in the Q&A at e-commerce day, that there's a few things that need to really change about the nature of people shopping before it gets that widespread adoption.
And in the information article, I found it very fascinating because with Woo, you know, some of this stuff is a little tricky to support because we don't host every Woo store in the world. So providing like a universal catalog for every Woo product in the world is like kind of tricky. I mean, there's ways to do it. Certainly if they sync with Jetpack or if we build some sort of crawler or opt-in thing, like we can centralize some stuff. But it turns out even Shopify, who I would assume this was much easier for, has huge data issues. And it's because people run their stores in different ways. They might say something is in stock when it's really not, or there might be different shipping variations, or there might be, you know, there's just different ways that people show product variations when they might not exist. Or, you know, there's all sorts of stuff out there that apparently even for Shopify, which hosts and has all the data, you know, it's all on their servers, sort of normalizing it in a way that's accessible to the users in a way that's also useful and accurate and true. Inside the chat interface has been a bigger challenge than certainly I would have imagined. So that's been something surprising to me as well. The information is like a paid site, but maybe someone can link. Actually, someone should, I'm surprised a WordPress news site hasn't covered this yet. So maybe request for a blog post for someone to summarize some of the stuff from the information article. And yeah.
Yeah, I think another point to consider is just how quickly AI is evolving. To kind of set a standard protocol now is challenging, but you know, a worthy exploration for sure. But yeah, our teams are digging into both ACP and UCP, and I'm sure if you keep an eye on the developer blog, that we will have some information about that very soon.
If I had to make a bet, well, I guess I will, a prediction, it's the amount of commerce that'll happen from people just in a chat interface versus the amount of commerce that will happen from AI agents driving browsers. And so using the normal website, the normal human interface. But some of that might be more like the autofill might be better with AI, or finding the product or navigating the site, like those sorts of things. Maybe even discovery of the product might be driven by the AI. That second part will be way, way, way bigger.
Yeah. Discovery is an interesting one because I always use AI now to recommend products to me. But it's still not great. So I use Claude most of the time, and it's still not great at actually providing a link to the product on any specific store. So it will say like, you want this product, and it would just be the name of the product, and then I have to go and search for it.
I would say Anthropic is the worst at that, actually.
Yes.
OpenAI, Perplexity, and Gemini, Google have gotten really, really good at linking the sites.
Yeah, and I think we'll see that evolve over time. But yeah, part of that experience is like reading the reviews yourself, and like Katie was saying, comparing free shipping costs and getting discount codes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but something I'm looking forward to seeing how that shapes up this year. And I think it's going to shape up pretty quickly at the rate things are going. We have a question which I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer. From Tommy on X, he says, are there any plans to bring back WooExpress? It was an easy way to onboard less technical clients that don't know what hosting, etc. are, but still want the flexibility of Woo and the scalability of WordPress.com.
Oh, what I will say is that, just like every other WordPress host in the world, on WordPress.com, we're making a ton of investment into sort of making things easier and that onboarding. One thing people don't realize is now every paid plan on WordPress.com supports full plugins and themes. So even the $4 a month one, you get the full WordPress.com scalability, the platform of WP Cloud, on every single paid plan. So there's not the 2 tiers of paid plans anymore. So, which kind of puts us in a similar category to every other web host in the world, right? You pay for it, you get full WordPress. Now that capability and our, sort of the very, very deep technical investments we've made done to make that scalable, performance, secure, everything. Like WordPress.com sites basically never get hacked. You don't have to worry about security in the same way that you might on a host that does not invest as much in the security. Those sorts of things are available, and we're very much thinking about tailored experiences. By the way, not just for WooCommerce, but also other plugins. So other plugins that all the other e-commerce plugins in the WordPress community, anything on WordPress.com, I want it to be kind of one-click easy. And in fact, just how there's blueprints for playgrounds where you can kind of like pre-configure something. I think we're going to start to see that become more, common in like kind of pre-configuring a hosting setup as well.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying it's not really needed because things have moved on more generally with WordPress.com and the different options and so on.
Well, and no, I think it's something like it still might be needed.
Sorry, WooExpress is whether that's needed.
Oh yeah, well, so to get the scalability and everything, you don't need it anymore. Scalability, security, upgrades, everything. The onboarding experience, I think, could definitely still be very much improved. So that's something I still do think is needed. So,
yeah.
And it was touched on in Porto, sorry. The having WooCommerce installed in WordPress is very much like you have a plugin installed. WordPress is the main site, and you have this kind of e-commerce section. And I think what something like WooExpress offered was a flip of that, where you've got this e-commerce admin experience versus a WordPress with e-commerce. So I do feel like that side of things is needed, and I think that'll be interesting to see.
And when you put it like that, I almost feel like it should just be a setting in the plugin, right?
Yeah, that's been discussed.
Woo is a minor thing. For some things, some sites, it's the whole thing. And in which case, I know it is tricky because a lot of plugins fight for real estate in the sort of navigation, the sort of standard Chrome of WordPress. But I think with user control, again, it might be aggressive to do this by default or something in the plugin, but like, having it be like, so people know what they're doing, they can switch it on and off. And like, for a plugin with the sort of surface area of Woo, certainly putting things at top level navigation, I think is okay. You have a few things there. And two, you can't imagine something where it does become a bit more primary. Now that said, I'd say like, don't completely hide the WordPress stuff. People still are going to have pages and blogs and everything like that. And it's nice to have the dashboard where they see the news and get involved in the community and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so. Cool, I think we're coming up on time. So how would you like to wrap it up?
Let's wrap it up with one more question about the future, which feels like a good ending. So let's go to Robin's question, which is long term. What does WooCommerce look like in 3+ years?
Oh, so things I'm certain of. It'll be faster. Making a ton of investments into performance. Updates will be seamless. I deal with a lot of things in the world. So despite people's perceptions of me, it actually takes a lot to get me like truly riled up. But the one thing that will do that without fail is when an update breaks a site. To me, that is the worst thing you could ever do with software. It makes me furious. It like is totally unacceptable, and it needs to happen 0 times. And it's possible. It's hard, but it's possible. And I think not just Woo, but every WordPress plugin developer has a responsibility to really put in the work to make updates as seamless as possible. Otherwise, once you lose that trust in updates, it's gone. So I'll say that updates will be frequent and seamless. And the interface will be much more modern, in the sense that it'll feel a lot more like a sort of modern app. And by the way, WordPress is going to evolve alongside that. So we're doing some fun stuff to sort of spruce up the WordPress admin a bit as well. And so Woo will both benefit from that, and I think build on top of it as well.
Awesome. The update point is very relevant. Do you feel like that's something that needs to happen at the plugin level or at the WordPress/hosting level as well?
That's a good question. I think there's work at every level, sort of like a defense in depth. This is the idea in security. Like, you don't just want one layer of security, you want multiple things, because one of them is probably going to fail inevitably. So then you have all these other layers in place that still make sure the bad thing doesn't happen, the fatal thing doesn't happen. So I do really appreciate at the hosting level, the investments people make into auto rollbacks, or some even do it like with visual testing on the front end and stuff like that. And of course, providing an ability for users to do that on demand is that sort of undo button. Beautiful. That's very important. As a last resort, I think the other important thing, and this is also getting easier with AI, is testing and sort of like having a great beta program, getting things out there in the world, doing automated testing on various, since you can get telemetry or feedback from your users on what the most common things they use WooCommerce with or your plugin with is. Like, how are you testing that? If you're a developer, are you testing the beta versions of both WordPress and WooCommerce? So finding any changes that might either you need to update for, or that maybe the core platform needs to be informed that they messed something up because they missed some edge case or some API you were using. So that it's going to take a village, but we've done it with WordPress. Now for I'm knocking on wood, but for many we've had many, many, many years of a very smooth update process, and for also hundreds of millions or billions of times now for plugins and themes as well. But of course, Core has become, I think rightly so, very trusted for upgrades. So.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on, and also thanks to everybody who submitted questions.
I really appreciate it, and congrats on this new format, new show, everything. I will definitely be a listener and watcher, and can't wait to see what y'all do.
Amazing, thank you. Next month we have James LePage joining us. We're going to be talking about how, well, the title is AI Meets Woo, and how AI is already reshaping e-commerce. So pop that in your calendar. It's on Tuesday, the 10th of February at the same time, no, an hour earlier.
It's an hour before.
ET and 5 p.m. CET. And hopefully there won't be any technical issues on that one.
Yeah, we'll be experts by then. And after that, James and I will be back every month to discuss a different area of WooCommerce. So please subscribe. This is a new podcast. All our accountants are new. So even if you subscribe to Open Channels, you also need to subscribe to Do the Woo. So subscribe at dothewoo.com, and that's where you've got all the links to the different places where you can watch or listen. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you.